I arrived early for Christmas Eve dinner. When I knocked on the door, my son yelled, "Go away! Marianne and I only want to see family." I left in silence, and 2 hours later he called me. "Mom, I need the keys to the beach house." I took a deep breath and said the 5 words he would never forget. "I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end and comment from which city you are watching me. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Eleanor Miller, and I'm 64 years old. I never thought my own son would shut the door in my face on Christmas Eve, but that's exactly what happened 3 weeks ago. I can still feel the cold of that evening hitting my face as I stood on the porch holding the gifts I had so lovingly bought. I had driven 40 minutes from my home to Richard's, my only son. Traffic was heavy because it was December 24th, but I didn't mind. I was excited to spend Christmas with him and Marianne, his girlfriend of 2 years. I had even bought a special gift for her, a gold bracelet I had seen her admiring in a jewelry shop a few months ago. I knocked softly on the door, expecting to hear Richard's familiar footsteps approaching. Instead, I heard raised voices from inside. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was tense. My stomach twisted a little. Richard had never been a confrontational person, but ever since he started dating Marianne, something had changed in him. The door opened abruptly, and there was my son. But there was no smile on his face, no warm hug I expected. His eyes were cold, almost as if he saw me as an annoying stranger. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked without even greeting me. My heart sank. "Richard, it's Christmas Eve. We agreed I'd come at 5 for dinner." I heard footsteps behind him, and Marianne appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a beautiful red dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her makeup was perfect, every hair in place, but there was something in her expression that chilled my blood. "Darling, who is it?" Marianne asked, as if she didn't know me, as if we hadn't had dinner together dozens of times over the past 2 years. Richard cleared his throat. "It's my mom." "Oh," Marianne said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Richard, I thought we talked about this." I didn't understand what was happening. I looked at my son, searching for some sign of the man I had raised, of the boy who used to run to me when I came home from work. "Look, Mom," Richard began, avoiding my gaze. "Marianne and I want this Christmas to be just for us, as immediate family." The words hit me like a slap. "But Richard, I am your family." Marianne stepped closer, placing her hand on Richard's arm possessively. "Mrs. Miller, you have to understand. Richard and I are building something new together. Sometimes it's important to have healthy boundaries." Healthy boundaries. The words sounded rehearsed, as if she had practiced them in front of a mirror. "Mom, maybe next year," Richard mumbled. "This year we need space." I felt my world wobble. I had spent all morning cooking Richard's favorite dessert, wrapping his presents, imagining what our Christmas would be like together. I had bought an extra-large turkey because I thought we might invite some friends. "But Richard," I whispered, my voice breaking, "it's Christmas." "I'm sorry, Mom." And with that, he closed the door. I stood there for I don't know how long. I could hear neighbors talking in their gardens, the sound of children laughing Christmas music drifting from different houses. Everyone seemed to be celebrating except me. Finally, I walked back to my car, my legs trembling. I put the gifts on the back seat and sat in silence for a few minutes, trying to process what had happened. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just felt empty. I drove back home in a state of shock. My small house felt lonelier than ever. I put the gifts under my Christmas tree and made myself a cup of tea. I was trying to decide what to do with the Christmas dinner I had prepared when my phone rang. It was Richard. "Yes?" I answered, my voice colder than I intended. "Mom, I need the keys to the beach house." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an explanation. It was a demand. "The keys?" I asked, confused. "What do you need them for?" "I just need them. It's important." There was something in his tone, something urgent and desperate, that stirred something within me. The beach house had belonged to my family for over 30 years. My late husband Charles and I had bought it when Richard was little. It was our refuge, our special place for family holidays. "Richard, what's going on?" "Nothing's going on, Mom. I just need the keys for a few days." "Is Marianne going with you?" Silence. Then, "That's none of your business." His rudeness surprised me. This wasn't the son I had raised. The Richard I knew would never have spoken to me like that. "The keys are on my key ring," I finally said. "If you really need them, you can come and get them tomorrow." "No, Mum, I need them tonight." "Tonight, Richard. It's Christmas Eve. Why the urgency? Just give them to me. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Something inside me hardened. "No, Richard. If you want the keys, you can come tomorrow and explain what you need them for." I hung up the phone. Over the next 2 hours, Richard called me 12 times. I didn't answer any. Each missed call was like a small confirmation that something was very wrong. My son, who had just shut me out of his life on Christmas Eve, suddenly had a desperate urgency to access family property. Finally, the phone stopped ringing, but I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake all night staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had done wrong as a mother, where I had failed, how I had raised a son who could treat me with such cruelty. But there was something else that bothered me, something I couldn't shake. Richard's urgency for those keys, the way Marianne had acted, as if I were a stranger, the changes in my son over the last few months. At dawn on December 25th, I made a decision. If Richard wanted those keys so badly, maybe it was time for me to find out why. I got dressed, took my spare set of beach house keys, and set off for the coast. If my son had secrets, it was time I uncovered them. The journey to the beach house normally soothed me. It was an hour-and-a-half drive along the coastal road with beautiful views of the ocean. But that Christmas morning as I drove, I could only think of Richard's cruelty the night before. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, not from the cold, but from the anxiety gnawing at me. I arrived at the house around 10 a.m. It was a modest but charming property located just 2 streets from the beach. My husband Charles and I had bought it for 50,000 talents over 30 years ago. Now it was easily worth 250,000 talents, maybe more. I had always thought it would someday belong to Richard, a gift for him and his future children. When I parked in the driveway, I immediately noticed something odd. There were recent tire tracks on the gravel, and they weren't mine. Someone had been here recently, probably in the last few days. I opened the front door with my master key and walked in. The house smelled different, not the typical mustiness of a property that has been closed for weeks. It smelled of fresh cleaner, and there was a subtle scent of feminine perfume in the air. Marianne had been here. I walked into the main living room, and my heart almost stopped. The furniture had been rearranged not drastically, but enough for me to notice. The solid wood coffee table that Charles had made with his own hands was at a different angle. The sofa cushions were perfectly arranged, too perfect for a house that was supposed to be empty. But what really alarmed me was what I found on the dining table. There were papers, scattered documents that had clearly been reviewed recently. I approached, my heart pounding. The documents were tenancy agreements, contracts for my beach house. With trembling hands, I picked up the first paper. It was a 1-week rental contract from December 28th to January 4th. The price, 2,000 pounds per week. It was signed by Richard Miller, my own son. I picked up the next document. Another tenancy agreement for the 2nd week of January, another 2,000 pounds. And another for the 3rd week, and another. There were more than 20 contracts here. Some already executed, others scheduled for the coming months. My head spun as I did quick calculations. If these contracts were real, Richard had been earning over 8,000 talents a month renting out my property. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst was the next folder I found. Inside were professional photographs of the house, taken from angles that made it look larger and more luxurious than it really was. There were detailed descriptions of the amenities maps of local attractions, even fake reviews from previous guests praising their stay. Richard had turned my beach house into a holiday rental business without even telling me. My phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. "Hello? We are the Johnson family. We arrive tomorrow for our week-long booking. Could you please send us the check-in instructions? We are so excited to stay in your beautiful beachfront home." I sat heavily in one of the dining chairs. There was a whole family planning to spend their holiday week here tomorrow, and they thought it was completely legal and proper. I continued reviewing the documents. There were cleaning deposit receipts, liability waiver forms, even a contract with a professional cleaning company. Richard wasn't just renting out my house. He had set up a fully professional operation. Then I found something that chilled my blood, a folder labeled Financial Projections. Inside were detailed spreadsheets showing projected rental income for the entire next year. The numbers were staggering, over £75,000 annual gross income. But what utterly devastated me was the line at the bottom of the sheet. Objective transfer legal ownership by December 31st to maximize tax benefits and eliminate reliance on current owner. The current owner, me, his mother. Richard wasn't just renting out my house without permission. He was planning to take it from me completely. My phone rang. It was Richard again. "Mom, I'm here," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Where are the keys? I need them right now." I looked around at all the documents scattered on my dining table, at the evidence of my son's betrayal. "What do you need them for, Richard?" "I told you that's none of your business." "It is my business." My voice rose slightly. "It's my business that you've been renting out my house without my permission." Complete silence on the other end of the line. "Richard, I don't know what you're talking about." The blatant lie hurt more than any slap. "I'm sitting in my beach house right now looking at tenancy agreements with your name on them." Another silence. Then I heard muffled whispers. Marianne was there with him. "Mom, can I explain?" "Then explain it." "It's complicated. Marianne had the idea to monetize the property. The house was just sitting there doing nothing most of the time." Doing nothing. It was my refuge, Richard. It was where your father and I made some of our dearest memories. "Mom, don't be so dramatic. It's just a house." "Just a house." Those 3 words broke my heart. "How long have you been doing this?" About 8 months." 8 months. I had been going to family visits with my son for 8 months, having dinner with him, asking about his work, worrying about his future. And all the while he had been stealing from me. "Richard, I have a family coming tomorrow expecting to stay here." "I know. That's why I needed the keys tonight. I had to get the house ready." "And you didn't think to tell me?" "I was going to tell you eventually after we transferred the property into your name." Another silence. I had hit a nerve. "How did you get the contracts in my name?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. "Mom, you gave me lasting power of attorney 5 years ago when you were in hospital. Remember?" I remembered. I had had a complicated surgery and had needed someone to handle my affairs while I recovered. I had trusted my son completely. "That LPA was for medical emergencies, Richard. Technically, it covers property decisions too. Technically, as if our relationship were a legal contract he could exploit for personal gain." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. I could hear the waves crashing in the distance, the same sound that had comforted my soul so many times over the years, but now it only felt like the sound of everything I was losing. My son had not only betrayed me, he had turned the most sacred place in my heart into a money-making machine. And worst of all, he had clearly planned to take it from me completely, probably with Marianne's help and encouragement. As I sat there surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal, I realized something. Richard had made a fatal error in his arrogance and greed. He had left all the evidence here assuming I would never find it, but I had found it, and now I had to decide what to do with this devastating information. After discovering the tenancy agreements, I couldn't just sit there. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal ran. I started searching every corner of the beach house, every drawer, every cupboard, looking for more evidence of what Richard had been doing behind my back. In the master bedroom, I found something that made me stagger. Hidden behind the dressing table mirror was a small safe one I had never seen before. It was partially open, as if someone had been in a hurry to close it. Inside, I found something that took my breath away completely. Documents, piles and piles of legal documents, but not just for the beach house. There were tenancy agreements for my main house in town, the same house where I had lived for 30 years, where I had raised Richard. According to the papers, it had been rented out on weekends for the past 6 months for $200 a night. My own home turned into a bed and breakfast without my knowledge. But that wasn't all. There were documents about my investment flat in the city center, the one I had bought 10 years ago, as security for my retirement. Richard had been renting it out for £650 a month, but according to my bank records, I had only been receiving £100 a month. He had been keeping £550 every month for over a year. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. With trembling hands, I continued checking the documents. There was a folder labeled Bank Accounts that made me feel nauseous. Inside were statements from an account I didn't recognize, but it was in my name, an account Richard had opened using my personal information and the lasting power of attorney. The deposits into that account were astonishing. In the last 8 months, there had been over $75,000 in rental income from my properties. Money I had never seen, never authorized, never known existed. There were more documents on property insurance that had been modified without my knowledge. Additional policies Richard had taken out to cover the risk of commercial rentals. Invoices for improvements and renovations he had made to my properties to make them more attractive to tenants, all paid for with my money from that secret account. But what truly shattered me was finding a folder labeled Transfer Plan. Inside was a detailed timeline of how Richard planned to transfer all my properties into his name over the next 6 months. He had consulted with solicitors specializing in elder law. He had researched laws on lasting power of attorney and property transfer. There was a printed email from a law firm that read, "We confirm that if the mother shows signs of cognitive decline or becomes care dependent, the transfer process can be significantly accelerated under deputyship provisions." I sat on the edge of the bed, reading that line again and again. Richard wasn't just stealing my money and my properties. He was planning to declare me incompetent to speed up the process. My phone vibrated with a text message from Marianne. "Mrs. Miller, Richard is very worried about you. You haven't answered his calls. Are you all right? Perhaps we should talk about setting up a more structured care plan for you." A more structured care plan. The words chilled me. Now I understood why Marianne had always insisted I seemed a bit forgetful lately, why she had suggested that perhaps I needed help with my finances. I continued exploring the safe and found something even more disturbing, a folder with my name on it containing falsified medical reports. Someone had been documenting incidents of confusion or forgetfulness that I had supposedly had. Specific dates where I had apparently forgotten appointments gotten lost, driving repeated stories. None of these incidents had actually occurred, but they were documented in such detail, with witness testimonies, including Marianne and Richard, that they seemed completely credible. They were building a case to prove I was no longer competent to manage my own affairs. I found my laptop in the bedroom wardrobe, obviously left there after they had used it. When I turned it on, I saw that my email had been hacked. There were messages sent from my account that I had never written communicating with banks and investment firms authorizing transactions I had never approved. There was an exchange of emails between my account and that of a financial planner I had never met. In the messages, I expressed concern about my deteriorating memory and requested that my son Richard be added as a co-signatory on all my accounts for added security. The planner had responded with documents to sign documents that had apparently already been completed and returned with my forged signature. As I reviewed email after email, I began to see the full extent of what Richard and Marianne had been doing. It wasn't just that they were renting out my properties. They had created a complete system to take control of my entire financial life. They had been depositing the rental income into separate accounts, leaving me with only my regular retirement income. Meanwhile, they had been using the lasting power of attorney to make changes to my insurance policies, my bank accounts, even my will. I found a copy of my will that had been modified 4 months ago. In this version, Richard not only inherited all my properties, but was also designated as my legal deputy in case I was declared incapacitated. Marianne was named as an alternate deputy. My phone rang. It was Richard again. "Mom, I'm very worried about you. You've been acting very strangely lately." "Strange?" I asked, my voice surprisingly controlled, considering the hurricane of emotions I felt inside. "Yes, forgetful, confused. Marianne and I have been talking, and we think maybe you need more support." "What kind of support? Well, maybe someone to help you manage your finances to make sure you're taking your medication, that sort of thing. Medication? I wasn't taking confusion. I had never experienced. Richard, where is all the rental money from my properties? A long silence. I don't know what you're talking about, Mum. See, this is exactly what I mean. You're confused. I'm looking at bank statements right now. £75,000 in 8 months. Mum, that's impossible. Maybe you're reading old documents or you haven't been taking your anxiety medication. I wasn't taking anxiety medication. I had never had anxiety until Richard started treating me as if I was losing my mind. Richard, why is there a medical report here that says, I forgot my medical appointment on October 15th? Why did you forget it, Mum? I had to call to reschedule it, don't you remember? But I did remember. I had gone to that appointment. I had arrived early and waited 45 minutes because the doctor was, Where did you get a medical report about me? Mum, I went with you to that appointment. The doctor was concerned about your memory. He said it was normal at your age, but we should be vigilant. Lie after lie after lie. And he was saying them with such conviction that for a moment it made me doubt my own memory. Richard, I want you to come here right now. I can't. Mum, I'm busy. It's not a request. I hung up and sat in silence, surrounded by the evidence of the most systematic and calculated betrayal I could have imagined. My son wasn't just stealing from me. He was trying to destroy my very identity, my competence, my autonomy. But he had made a mistake. He had left all the evidence here probably because he never thought I would be smart enough or suspicious enough to look. Now I knew the truth. The question was, what was I going to do with it? I spent that entire night at the beach house meticulously organizing all the evidence I had found. I didn't sleep a wink. Every document, every bank statement, every fake email, I photographed it all with my phone and organized it into separate folders. If I was going to confront Richard, I needed to be completely prepared. At 7 a.m. on December 26th, I drove back to the city. All the way I rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm, how I would demand answers, but nothing could have prepared me for what actually happened. I arrived at Richard's house at 8:30. His car was in the driveway along with Marianne's pink convertible. I knocked on the door, and this time I didn't wait for them to open it. I used the key Richard had given me years ago for emergencies. I found them in the kitchen, sitting at the breakfast table with papers scattered between them. When they saw me, they both stiffened. Marianne quickly gathered the documents and put them in a folder, but not before I caught a glimpse that they were more legal papers. "Mum," Richard said slowly, standing up, "I didn't know you were coming." "I bet you didn't," I replied, closing the door behind me. Marianne stood up, smoothing her perfectly coiffed hair. "Mrs. Miller, what an early surprise." I put my handbag on the kitchen counter and took out one of the folders I had organized the night before. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firmer than it had been in months. Richard and Marianne exchanged a look. It was a look laden with meaning, as if they had rehearsed for this moment. "Of course, Mum. Do you want coffee?" Richard moved towards the coffee machine, but I stopped him. "Sit down." There was something in my tone that made both he and Marianne obey immediately. I sat opposite them and opened the folder. £75,000, I said, pulling out the bank statements. "That's the amount of money you've been stealing from my rental properties over the past 8 months. The color drained from Richard's face. "Mum, I can explain." "Explain this, then," I interrupted, putting the property transfer documents on the table. "A plan to transfer all my properties into your name." Marianne cleared her throat. "Mrs. Miller, I think you're misunderstanding." "I'm misunderstanding this, too." I put the falsified medical reports on the table. Documents that indicate I'm losing my memory, that I need specialized care. Richard turned pale. "Mom, those documents are to protect you." "To protect me." My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. "Or to steal everything I own." Marianne leaned forward, her expression changing to something more calculated, colder. "Look, Mrs. Miller, I understand this may seem confusing to you." "I'm not confused, Marianne. I'm furious." "But that's exactly why you need help." Marianne continued, her voice taking on a condescending tone. "These exaggerated emotional reactions, the paranoia. Paranoia. I rose from the chair so quickly it wobbled. Do you call discovering that my own son has been systematically stealing from me paranoia? Richard finally spoke, but his words hurt more than any slap. Mom, it's not stealing, it's intelligent asset management. These properties were going to waste. Going to waste? Yes, he said, apparently gaining confidence. The beach house was empty most of the time. Your investment flat had tenants who paid very little. We maximized the income potential. I repeated. So Marianne is part of this. Marianne smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. Richard needed someone with business experience. I worked in property management before I met him. Did you work in property management, or did you work scamming elderly people? Her smile vanished. Be careful what you say. Or what are you going to add more false incidents to my medical record? Richard stood up. Mom, nobody is trying to hurt you. We are trying to help you. Help me by forging my signature on bank documents. Your lasting power of attorney gives me the right. For medical emergencies, I cut him off, not to create secret bank accounts. Marianne leaned back in her chair, studying me with a completely different expression. Now the mask of the sweet, concerned daughter-in-law had completely disappeared. You know what, Mrs. Miller? Maybe it's time we were honest here. Please, I said, crossing my arms, be honest. You're a 64-year-old woman living alone with no real plan for your future. Richard is your only son. Who do you think is going to inherit these properties when you die anyway? Her blatant cruelty took my breath away for a moment. So what does it matter if we start managing the assets now? She continued. At least this way a real income is being generated for you. You mean a real income is being generated for you? Richard stood up, walking towards the window. Mom, you don't understand the financial realities of the modern world. Financial realities, Richard. I worked as an accountant for 30 years. I understand finances perfectly. You worked as an accountant 20 years ago, Marianne said. Things have changed. They haven't changed so much that theft is legal. It's not theft, Richard shouted, turning to me. It's future planning. Do you think you're going to live forever? Do you think these properties are going to maintain themselves? I think they are mine until I die, and I have the right to decide what to do with them. Marianne let out a bitter laugh. Rights. Do you know what your rights are? Your rights are what we allow you to have. The threat in her voice was unmistakable. What exactly does that mean? I asked. Richard returned to the table, but didn't sit down. Instead, he leaned towards me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was hard cold, completely devoid of the love I had known all his life. It means, Mom, that if you continue to be difficult about this, we are going to take more drastic measures. What kind of measures? Marianne responded. We have extensive medical documentation regarding your cognitive decline. We have testimonies from people who have observed your erratic behavior. If we need to go to court to obtain full deputyship, we will. That documentation is false. Can you prove it? Richard asked. Do you have witnesses that you never forgot those appointments? Can you prove that you never got confused about dates or got lost driving? My heart sank as I realized the position they had put me in. They had been building this case against me for months, perhaps years, and they had done it so cleverly that it would be almost impossible to refute. Besides, Marianne added, who is going to believe you, an elderly woman living alone, clearly paranoid about her own family, versus a concerned son and his fiancée, both young professionals who only want the best for Mom? Richard finished. They looked at each other and smiled. It was a cold, calculated smile, the smile of two people who had planned this down to the last detail. So, Marianne said, what are you going to do? Cooperate with us and maintain some level of independence, or do this the hard way? I looked at my son, this man I had raised, who I had loved unconditionally for 32 years, the boy who used to climb into my bed during storms, who brought me flowers from the garden when he was 5, who cried when he got hurt and only wanted Mom to comfort him. That boy had completely disappeared. In his place was a cruel stranger who was willing to destroy me to get what he wanted. One more thing, I said, standing up. What if I don't cooperate and you can't prove your case of incompetence? Richard and Marianne exchanged another look. "Oh, but we can," Marianne said softly, "because if necessary, we will make sure there are more documented incidents, more confusion, more evidence that you need care." The threat was clear. If I didn't cooperate voluntarily, they would make me appear incompetent by force if necessary. I gathered my documents and put them back in the folder. "I need time to think about this," I finally said. "Of course," Richard said, his tone now falsely gentle. "But not too long. We have commitments to meet." I walked towards the door, my mind racing. I had not only lost my son, I had discovered he was a dangerous stranger who was willing to destroy my life for money. But as I left that house, one thing was clear. If they wanted a war, they would have it. They just didn't know who they were really up against. After leaving Richard's house, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trembling not from fear, but from a rage so pure it almost suffocated me. But beneath that rage, something else was brewing, a cold, calculated determination I had never felt before. They had made a fatal mistake. They thought that because I was an older woman, I would be easy to intimidate. They thought that because I had been a loving and trusting mother, I would be easy to manipulate. They didn't know that I had spent 30 years working as an accountant, navigating complex systems, detecting discrepancies and fraud. They didn't know who they were dealing with. For the next 3 days, I acted exactly as they expected. I returned their calls, outwardly agreed to their terms, even signed some documents they put in front of me. But every signature I put down was strategically calculated. Every conversation was recorded on my phone. Every document I signed was photographed before and after, because while they believed they had broken me, I was building my own plan. On December 29th, 3 days after our confrontation, I went to see James Morrison, a solicitor specializing in elder law whom I had found after hours of online research. His office was in the financial district in a building that screamed competence and experience. "Mrs. Miller," he told me after reviewing all my documents for an hour, "what you're showing me here is a classic case of elder financial abuse, but it's also one of the most sophisticated I've ever seen." "How sophisticated?" "Your son and his girlfriend have been building this scheme for at least a year. They've falsified medical documents, created fraudulent bank accounts, used your lasting power of attorney illegally, and established a pattern of documentation that suggests incompetence. It's brilliant in a perverse way." "Brilliant?" My voice hardened. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that in a positive sense. What I mean is that it will be difficult to fight in traditional courts. You would have to prove that all these documented medical incidents are false, that you never had memory problems, that your signature was forged." "But," James smiled, "they made several mistakes. First, they used the LPA outside its legal scope. Second, they created a bank account using false information. Third, and most importantly, they have been operating a commercial business using properties that are not legally yours." "What does that mean?" "It means we can attack this from a completely different angle. We don't need to prove that you are competent. We need to prove that they are criminals." Over the next 2 hours, James and I devised a strategy that was as silent as it was lethal. We weren't going to family court. We weren't going to fight over mental competence. We were going to treat them for what they were, criminals who had committed banking fraud, identity theft, and operated illegal businesses. "How long do you need to gather more evidence?" James asked me. "A week." "Perfect. In the meantime, I'm going to contact some colleagues in the financial crime unit. What they've done here isn't just a civil matter, it's criminal." That night, I began the most dangerous phase of my plan. I needed more evidence, but to get it, I had to make them believe I had completely accepted their control. I called Richard. "Mom," his voice sounded relieved. "Glad to hear from you. Marianne and I were worried." "I've been thinking about what you said," I lied, forcing my voice to sound tired and defeated. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need help." A silence then. "Really? I'm tired of fighting Richard. I just want things to go back to normal between us." I could practically hear his smile through the phone. "That's wonderful, Mom. I knew you'd see things from our perspective. But I need to fully understand what you've been doing. If I'm going to trust you with my finances, I need to see everything." "Of course. What do you want to know?" "Everything." Every account, every contract, every document. I want to understand how you've been managing things." Richard was so excited by my apparent capitulation that he agreed to show me everything. We arranged to meet the next day at the office they had rented to handle their rental operations. The office was in a commercial building on the outskirts of the city. When I arrived, I was surprised at how professional everything looked. They had invested real money in computers' property management software. They had even hired 2 part-time employees to handle bookings and cleaning. All paid for with my money, of course. Marianne greeted me at the door with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Miller, how lovely to see you with a more positive attitude." "I just want to understand," I said, keeping my voice submissive. For the next 3 hours, they showed me everything, every bank account, every system they had set up, every plan for the future. It was like a full corporate presentation of how they had monetized my life. They had turned my 3 properties into a business that generated over £125,000 annually. My main house was rented out for $200 a night on weekends. My investment flat had become a luxury rental for £2,000 a month, and the beach house rented for between £3,000 and £4,000 per week, depending on the season. "See?" Richard said, pointing to the numbers on the screen. "In 5 years, these properties will have generated enough money to buy 2 additional properties. We're building a property empire, Mum." An empire built on my life without my consent. But I smiled and nodded, recording every word on my phone, which was hidden in my handbag. "It's impressive," I said. "You've really thought of everything." "We have to be clever about this," Marianne added. "The property market is changing. If we don't maximize the potential now, we lose opportunities." "I understand. And what about me? Where do I live while my properties are rented out?" Richard and Marianne exchanged a glance. "We've been looking for a perfect place for you," Marianne said. "A retirement community with all the services you need. Medical care meals, social activities. A care home." "No, not a care home," Richard said quickly. "An assisted living complex, very nice, very comfortable, and with the money we're generating from the properties we can easily pay for it." Of course they could. They were going to use my money to put me in an institution while they lived like kings in my properties. We think the transition could be gradual," Marianne said, "over the next 6 months. In the meantime, you can stay in the flat on days it's not rented." "And what if I don't like the arrangement?" Another exchange of glances. "Mum," Richard said, his tone turning slightly threatening. "Once you make the transition, it will be permanent. The contracts you've signed this week give us full authority over your housing decisions." There was the final confirmation that they had never planned to give me any choice. "I understand," I said softly. That night, I took all the new evidence to James Morrison. I had audio recordings, photographs of documents, copies of fraudulent contracts, and more importantly, I had their recorded confessions that they had been operating illegally using my properties. "This is more than enough," James said, reviewing everything. "We can proceed immediately." "What exactly will happen?" "First, we are going to freeze all accounts they have created using your information. Second, we are going to cancel all existing rental contracts. Third, we are going to transfer all properties to a protected trust that only you can control. And Richard and Marianne are going to face criminal charges for banking fraud, identity theft, and operating an illegal business. They could face up to 10 years in prison." A part of me, the part that still remembered the child I had raised, felt bad for a moment. But then I remembered the threats, the cruelty, the way they had planned to steal not just my money, but my very freedom. "Do it," I said. On January 1st, while Richard and Marianne were probably celebrating their success, the legal documents were filed. By January 2nd, all fraudulent bank accounts were frozen. By January 3rd, all New Year's guests in my properties were informed that their reservations had been canceled due to fraud. And I sat in my house, the same house they had planned to take from me, waiting for my phone to ring. I didn't have to wait long. The phone rang at 6:43 a.m. on January 3rd. Richard. "Mum?" His voice was filled with panic. "What on earth is going on? All our accounts are frozen." I poured myself a cup of coffee before answering, enjoying the moment. "Good morning, Richard." Don't tell me good morning. Marianne is hysterical. We have guests arriving today, and we can't access any of the properties. The locks have been changed. How strange, I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm. Mom, stop acting like you don't know what's going on. What did you do? I took back what's mine. A long silence. Then you can't do this. We have legal contracts. Fraudulent contracts, I corrected him. Contracts you signed using a lasting power of attorney you had illegally abused. Mom, can't we resolve this? You don't have to. I already resolved it, Richard. I could hear Marianne shouting in the background something about solicitors and lawsuits. Listen, Richard said, his voice now pleading. I know we made some mistakes, but we're family. We can fix this. We're family, I repeated. Is that what we are? Because when you shut the door in my face on Christmas Eve, I didn't feel like family. When you threatened to declare me incompetent, I didn't feel like family. That was because we were stressed. Business is complicated, Mom. Business is complicated, I agreed, especially when it's illegal. What do you mean? I mean that using my identity to open bank accounts is identity theft. Operating a rental business using properties that aren't yours is fraud. Falsifying medical reports is forgery. Another silence. When Richard spoke again, his voice was different, harder, more threatening. Mom, you don't know what you're getting into. If you ruin us, we're going to ruin you too. We have documentation of your mental incompetence. You mean the falsified documentation? I asked. James Morrison? My solicitor says that's a crime too. Solicitor? Yes, Richard. It turns out an elderly woman can hire solicitors, private investigators, and forensic accountants. The line went silent. You underestimated me, I continued. You thought that because I was a loving mother, I'd be an easy victim, but you forgot that I was also a successful professional for 30 years. Marianne says we can fight this, Richard murmured, but he no longer sounded convincing. Please fight it, I told him. It will be fun explaining to a judge how you've been operating an illegal business, falsifying medical documents, and threatening an elderly person. I hung up the phone. An hour later, Marianne called. Her voice was pure venom. This isn't going to end well, you stupid old woman. Probably not, I agreed. Criminal charges usually take time to process. Criminal charges? Oh, Richard didn't tell you the prosecutor is very interested in your little operation. Apparently, elder financial abuse is a priority these days. I could hear her ragged breathing through the phone. You don't understand what you've done, she hissed. We've invested everything in this business. We have debts obligations. Debts you incurred using stolen money, I pointed out. Obligations you made with properties that weren't yours. Richard is going to hate you for this. Marianne, I said softly, Richard already hated me. The difference is, now I no longer care. I hung up. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal activity. James Morrison worked with an efficiency that impressed me. All my properties were transferred to a revocable trust that only I controlled. The fraudulent bank accounts were closed, and all funds were transferred back to accounts under my exclusive control. More importantly, the criminal investigations officially began. Richard and Marianne were summoned for questioning. Their computers were confiscated. Their rental office was shut down by the authorities. On January 9th, a week after my counterattack began, I received an unexpected visit. It was Richard, but he looked terrible. He had lost weight, had deep dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes were wrinkled. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Mum, he said when I opened the door, I need to talk to you. Where's Marianne? She left. His voice broke slightly. She left yesterday when she realized we were really going to face criminal charges. I felt no satisfaction hearing that, only a deep sadness for what my son had lost by pursuing money that wasn't his. Come in, I told him. He sat on my sofa, the same sofa where he used to snuggle as a child on Sunday afternoons, but the child had completely disappeared. In his place was a broken man who had made terrible choices. I'm sorry, he whispered. What are you sorry for? Everything. Everything we did, the way we treated you, the lies. Tears began to roll down his cheeks. I don't know what I became. I sat in the chair opposite him, studying his face, looking for some trace of the son I had raised. Why, Richard? Why did you do this? I don't know, he mumbled. At first, Marianne just suggested we maximize the potential of the beach house while you weren't using it. It seemed like a clever idea. And after that, the numbers were so good, we were making so much money, and she kept saying it was going to be mine someday anyway. So what did it matter if we started a little early? A little early, but then it got more complicated. We needed more documents, more legal authority. And when you started asking questions, they decided to declare me incompetent. He nodded miserably. It was Marianne's idea. She said it was the only way to protect what we had built. And you agreed. His voice broke completely. I was so deep into it I didn't know how to get out, and she convinced me that you really did need help, that it was for your own good. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he looked up. Can you forgive me? It was the question I had been waiting for and dreading, the question that had kept me awake for nights. I don't know, I told him honestly. Are you going to drop the charges? No. His face fell. Why not? Because, Richard, if there are no consequences, you'll never truly understand what you did, and the next elderly person you meet might not have the ability to defend themselves as I did. He nodded slowly. What's going to happen to me? I don't know. That depends on the judicial system. And us, our relationship. I looked at this man who had been my baby, my boy, my reason for living for so many years. The love was still there, buried deep beneath layers of pain and betrayal. But the trust, the respect, the ease of our former relationship that was destroyed, perhaps forever. I don't know that either, I told him. Maybe someday, but for now, I need you to understand that choices have consequences. He stood to leave but paused at the door. Mom, can I ask you something? What? When did you know? When did you realize what we were doing? The moment you shut the door on me on Christmas Eve, I told him. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew the son I had raised would never have treated me like that. He nodded and left. 2 months later, Richard pleaded guilty to multiple counts of financial fraud. He received 3 years of probation and 500 hours of community service working with the elderly. He also had to pay a fine of £20,000. Marianne had completely disappeared. James Morrison told me she had probably done this before and knew when to flee. As for me, for the first time in my adult life, I found myself completely free. Free from the expectations of being the perfect mother, the woman who always forgave the one who always put family first. I sold the beach house. The memories were too tainted. With that money, I traveled for the first time in decades. I went to Europe, to Asia, to places Charles and I had dreamed of visiting but never could because we were always saving for Richard's future. I also changed my will. Most of my estate now goes to charities that help victims of elder abuse. Richard and I talk occasionally, careful, superficial conversations. Maybe someday we can rebuild something, but it will be different. It will be a relationship based on mutual respect, not on the assumption that a mother's love is infinite and unconditional, because I learned something important during this terrible experience. Love can be infinite, but tolerance for abuse should not be. Today I am 65 years old. I live in a beautiful flat that I chose for myself, and for the first time in decades, all the decisions in my life are mine. It's an intoxicating feeling. And when young people like Marianne see me and assume I'm an easy victim because I'm older, I just smile because I'm no longer the woman I was. I am someone who learned that it is never too late to stand up for yourself, never too late to reclaim your life, and never too late to discover exactly how strong you truly are.